Hello, I'm so happy I got a hold of you, and yes, this week we are taking a look at Live Alive. Not this one. This one. Let's check it out. The original Live Alive was one of the first games I reviewed for this channel back in 2015. It was a very interesting game, one that I've come to more fondly regard the longer it sits with me. Its hybrid, tactical turn-based combat and non-linear storytelling was something I hadn't really experienced at the time, especially not for an RPG that came out in 1994. Unimpressive graphics and all, it really left a mark on me. And it certainly did help that I felt like a cool kid in the secret club of Westerners who knew about this gem. Well, flash forward 7 years and Square Enix had me shouting like an FF7 fanboy seeing this game finally get a Western release. And in glorious Octopath 2.5 HD to boot. Now this will be a first for me. I've never reviewed a game twice, even if this is a remake. And let me tell you, they remained very true to the source. I can't tell you how nice it was to experience a remake that painstakingly recreated the original without changing fundamentals to the game. They also sparingly used modern advancements to improve the game in subtle but tremendous ways, ironing out some of the rough edges and more obtuse where the hell do I go syndromes the original could suffer from. It also helps that I'm a massive fanboy to the 2.5D look. The Octopath engine seems to handle this style of game better than the tactical genre. All the visuals looked crisp and clear. I found triangle strategy to come off a little muddy at times. The only issue I ran into with this game is I caught a little bit of slowdown and shimmering on the ninja rooftop. That's it. Alright, enough intro. Let's dive into the multi-layered journey that is Live Alive. The cover art sadly does spoil that there is an 8th chapter. Discovering that little tidbit was a tremendous surprise playing the original, but alas, we will get to that later. There are 7 chapters that you can tackle in any order. On the Super Famicom, they were labeled by the main character archetype: ninja, cowboy, wrestler, kung fu, etc. But now they are organized by time frame. Modern day, far future, Imperial China, and so forth. And I have to say, it lends a certain gravitas to the selections. In a game where the scenarios don't appear to connect much on the surface, it timelines the game in a much nicer way. New to this release, you can replay chapters once you have beaten them in case you want to go and hit some of the things you missed the first go-round. You can also pause mid-scenario and start another one. And the best quality of life additions would be the addition of an autosave feature that will prevent you from losing too much precious progress, as these old RPGs are notorious for doing. Now, the original had a very friendly save anywhere feature, which this game retains, but the autosave is nice for moments where you get yourself in more trouble than you bargained for. The other quality of life update is the addition of a mini-map that points out story objectives, rooms, and exit paths. Now, the main story direction will always be highlighted by orange, brown squares, and flags, making it impossible to get lost, unlike the SNES original. This is especially helpful in sections like the robot chapter that require interacting with specific objects and traveling to and from various rooms to trigger events. However, this can also lead to some rushing through chapters and missing out on various secrets each scenario holds. Now, the last addition is the Stardust that highlights item pickups. Now, this can be a love-hate thing to some. It does cut down on the OCD RPG tick of searching every nook and cranny, but it trivializes things like the cowboy scenario's mad dash through the town to gather supplies. But ultimately, it's an addition I like, as it helps save time searching rooms needlessly. So what makes this game so special? Live Alive is not afraid to slow burn at times. There are long periods of stillness that really drew me in. The tension of the cowboy duel, seeing tumbleweeds roll by. The anxiety of waiting for the robot's elevator to land and put you back in potential harm's way. A quiet moment while the psychic gathers his resolve to push himself to the limit. Live Alive is not afraid to let the world and its characters breathe, which is a huge plus in a game that rips the floor out from under you every 1 to 3 hours, and as you start a completely different style and setting of game from scratch. The fact that it manages to flesh out these worlds and characters in such short time frames is rather impressive. Part of this is because so many of these rely on archetypes and built-in knowledge, westerns, ninja movies, fighting games, caveman shenanigans, but it doesn't feel cheap. It feels like you get this short time to experience these worlds and, quite honestly, live a life as they accomplish the most important thing they do in that life. Well, maybe not the caveman. It accomplishes all that by cutting down needless RPG grinding and gets straight to the point. And it doesn't skimp out on the secrets and little hidden things you can find in each chapter as well. Now, we would be remiss not to take into account that this game was made by a 1994 Squaresoft. One can only think that this game was an excuse to throw all their non-Final Fantasy ideas at the wall and see what stuck. And in yet another improvement to quality of life, all dialogue and cutscenes can be skipped via button prompt, so you don't have to watch that slow-ass elevator move once you've seen it 4 times. Now, this makes subsequent playthroughs to find the things you missed very easy. And in the best callback to the SNES era, they left this legendary bit of Mode 7 in Captain Square. The SNES might still have done it better though, just saying. Now, the 7 starter scenarios all vary in length and amount of combat. Some will have virtually no combat, while others will be dripping with it. Now, each one is unique and does not overstay its welcome. Once you see the credits roll, you are invigorated to tackle the next. You have an Old West Last Stand, with a timer sequence requiring you to prepare a town defense before sunrise, a prehistoric scenario acted out with 0 dialogue. Seriously, there is no dialogue, just grunts. In an especially nice touch, the thought bubbles show the Super Famicom character sprites. A ninja mission that can either be played as a stealth mission or a bloodbath. Kill count is recorded, encouraging you to take no prisoners, except maybe Goemon. He's alright. A wrestler scenario that's basically the closest thing to an RPG fighting game I can think of. They even have a Hulk Hogan wannabe. A kung fu scenario akin to Karate Kid. Master and Padawan have to take on an evil stable of villains utilizing the Master's ultimate technique. An alien-inspired space thriller that may have the very first implementation of an unkillable stalker boss in a game. And lastly, a Neo Tokyo romp featuring Clockwork Orange-inspired villains, Jet Jaguar, and a friggin' kaiju chicken god. Now, all on their own could have been fleshed out and made into separate games of varying quality, but here as a package, it is quite spectacular, and now with the 2022 treatment, it's downright legendary. Now, in my original review, I was not the biggest fan of the combat. It does have the bonus of refilling your health and character statuses between bouts, but I found it a little confusing and cumbersome and very easy to cheese. Well, to be fair, you can still cheese the hell out of it, but in this game, I loved it. I don't know if it's because my acumen has grown or because it's a much more visually appealing game. It is still a very unorthodox style of turn-based grid combat, and it's actually remarkably similar to the South Park RPG combat. Now, new to this remake, they have added yellow bar timers above the units so you know when the turn order is coming. Having these bars makes the combat much easier to predict and strategize for, as opposed to the hidden ones of the SNES. Now, once your bar fills up, you start an action phase. You can move as many tiles as you want in an action phase, but everyone else's bars fill up for every tile you move. So be careful, don't move needlessly. If an enemy bar fills up, they act immediately. Now, if you have multiple characters with full yellow bars, you can pass your turn to the character you want to act first. You can also use the wait command to allow the yellow bars to fill up on the field without having to move a tile. If you notice, in some fights, enemies do not take an action because if they are unable to attack, they will use the wait ability. Use this behavior to your advantage. Now, characters cannot walk through other characters on the grid, and some take up multiple tiles, so positioning is important to note. Choosing an attack or using an item ends the action phase. Most attacks are instant, some will have a charge bar. This will then show up as a red bar that needs to fill up before an action takes place. In that time, as any good tactical RPG fan knows, if the enemy moves out of the way, you will hit nothing. The good news is that also applies to you, and is generally how you avoid killing blows on the final bosses of scenarios. You can also interrupt these attacks, and they can be interrupted. Now, moves require no reagents or mana, so you could spam attacks to your heart's content. Some will stun, poison, paralyze, limit accuracy, fortify the player, so on. Most scenarios have some semblance of a heal or a healer. The wrestler scenario actually allows you to learn the moves of your enemies in a pseudo Mega Man type game where the later enemies will have vulnerabilities to moves you learn from the other enemies. You can also add tile hazards to the ground like fire, poison. They'll harm both you and the enemy. Some will even heal the enemy. Make sure to move out of it. Now, character facing matters too. Some moves can only be used while facing certain direction. Using a move that flips your enemies facing is a good way to stall them, prevent counterattacks, and can also interrupt charge attacks. There are also moves that will either move the enemy's grid position or the player's. These are key moves as the enemy will generally expend a turn returning back to its old position. Crowd control is a big factor in lessening fight difficulty. Now, unlike in the original, all this information is very evident and you will learn quickly how to interrupt and how to use positioning to your advantage. It's all very engaging. However, it does make the combat incredibly easy. This is not a bad thing, given that you really aren't meant to spend that much time in combat, outside of a few scenarios. There is no required grinding at all in this game. Now, seeing enemy attack patterns and placing your units out of harm's way is immensely satisfying, but it makes even the final boss fights feel trivial. Well, all except the secret bosses, but those are difficult because of overpowered mechanics that do require grinding. Now, some of the leads won't even earn experience in their scenarios. The cowboy and kung fu master don't. The robot doesn't fight, and in the psychic chapter, you stop gaining experience once you take over the Iron Giant. But this part is just fun as hell, and that's what this game delivers in spades despite easy mode combat. Now, I know some of you like to actually hear me talk about the music, and let me tell you, the music in the original release was decent enough, but I found myself really appreciating the quality of music more this time around. The title song is exceptionally epic and perfectly suits the 8th chapter. The Old West vibe evokes a Clint Eastwood spaghetti western. Imperial China has very beautiful sweeping music to go along with its mystical bamboo forest. Near Future has a heroic Mighty Morphin Power Rangers fight to go with the Iron Giant. And my favorite track is the exceptionally hot Megalomania. This track signifies the last boss fight of each scenario. I love when RPGs do this. That epic music lets you know it's time to go all out, and I find myself chasing that beat as the scenarios go on. Also notably, the game is fully voice acted, and it's actually pretty solid. I'm honestly not a huge fan of voice acting in RPGs, and I'm accustomed to reading the text faster than it is spoken, but for those who like it, they won't be disappointed with the offering here. Or you can skip it mid-sentence like I do and get a taste of the dialogue.
There's no talking him out of, so we may as well try and back him up. Yes, of course.
There's also Japanese voice acting too that you can switch to if you prefer that. Now here is where we get into heavy spoilers. Please jump to the time code below to avoid spoiling any of the great reveals that occur once you beat the 7 chapters. Now, as I mentioned before, there is an 8th scenario that unlocks after beating the other 7. In my original review, it was one of my favorites, and that still holds true for the remake. This is also the only scenario that has random battles. In every other scenario, you choose your fights or sniff them out, literally. That combined with a medieval setting makes it very clear that this is the game's take on your typical JRPG story. It encourages grinding, fights that actually require thinking, well, at least until you get a full party, and your hero is the typical spiky-haired, sword-wielding, silent protagonist. The scenario starts with a tournament where our silent swordsman easily wins, henceforth winning the hand of the princess in marriage. She is then quickly kidnapped by the evil one. Now it's up to you to save the princess from the evil Dark One for your king and country. Along the way, you traverse mountains, towns, fields, and caves, recruiting allies along the way. Your team corners the evil one, the badass music plays, you slay the evil one, but something is amiss. The game inexplicably continues. 2 of your party members die. The rinse and repeat setup that has held true all game is effectively subverted. From here, the rest of the night scenario feels aimless, as you slowly lose the respect and trust of everyone around you, even allowing yourself to be tricked into killing the king. It all culminates with the reveal that your friend did not actually die, but had been having a secret love affair with the princess that you were aware of, but went ahead and won the tournament anyways. After you kill him for good, the princess kills herself, and you are left with nothing. The world hates you, everyone is dead, and you embrace it. And here the silent protagonist speaks, and is actually the bad guy. Now I'll admit, I still don't completely buy this whole setup. In my initial review, I felt this character got the short end of the stick, and I'm still trying to justify why he's to blame this time. I think the secret affair could have been better fleshed out, but let's just go with it. So yes, Osric becomes Odio the Dark One and connects all these Odios across the decades as we steamroll into the end of the game, Chapter 9. You are then given another option of picking your final game character. If you choose the Knight, you will go back to the 7 boss fights and play as the boss and kill all the other player characters to get the bad ending. But the other 7 will send you to the medieval world where you must recruit the other 6 players and take on Odio. Now, whoever you pick as your first tune will always be your party leader, and then the other 3 can be cycled through as you choose. I went with the robot as my captain, as his Mega Beam attack is very overpowered, and as well as his healing abilities are really helpful to have. And now in this area, you can complete mini trials to earn the best weapons for your character. Wisdom gets the robot his best weapon, Keys Ninja his, and so on. Once you've leveled your team a bit, head to the Dark Lord where you will fight Odio. If you have all 7 and refuse to kill him, you will then have a chance to run through the previous 7 boss fights again, but this time you're by yourself. And all these are still fairly easy, except for the Cowboy one. The Cowboy one can be a little tricky. You gotta avoid that Gatling barrage, otherwise you're screwed. And then in a new addition to this game, if you beat all 7, you then get to take on Sin Odio, which is the true form of the final boss, and it actually allows the knight to redeem himself and have all 7 main characters fight as one. Now, having this ending actually fixed a lot of the sour taste I had in my mouth from feeling the knight got a little underwritten in the original. Giving him this redemption arc, as well as this super cool optional end boss, really puts the cherry on top of a great game. Live Alive is a testament to the brilliance of 1990s Squaresoft, and it proves that games do not have to be remade to 2022's standards. Hopefully this means that Square Enix will look at more of their back catalog and bring some more of these games that we didn't get. Terranigma much? And God knows, if they had made this game to 2022 standards, Chapters 8 and 9 would have been paid DLC. Taking all that into account, I give this my Lucious T recommendation of beat it. And there you have it. That's it for this week. Let me know what you guys thought about Live Alive. Let me know if you've played it, if you plan on playing it. I made another video last week, which is great for people that are trying to begin the game and may not know if they can, if they have time, what it's about. Kind of breaks down a lot of helpful tips that will help people if they don't know what they're doing going into it. But yeah, that's what you get for this week, guys. It's been so nice getting a hold of you. Take care.
Thank God. Finally. After 3 days and 3 nights of walking through the desert.
Father?